All right, so we're diving into the Pain Chronicles today, a whole stack of excerpts here, all about chronic pain. You really seem to be interested in how it all works, how we deal with it, and the mind's role.
Yeah, this book by Melanie Thernstrom, it's fascinating the way she weaves together personal stories and patient experiences and then brings in these insights from doctors and researchers. It gives you a really well-rounded look at pain.
Yeah, and from what I've been reading so far, it's pretty clear just how widespread chronic pain is. We're not talking about a small problem here.
Right, it affects millions, millions of people.
Yeah, it's a bit unsettling, isn't it?
It is, and it has such a huge impact. It's not just about the physical discomfort,
Mm.
chronic pain. It takes a toll mentally and emotionally, too. It
Yeah.
disrupts your sleep. It can affect your work, your relationships. It can impact every corner of your life.
Wow, okay. So we've established it's a big problem, serious consequences. But I'm curious about how pain actually works in the brain. Thernstrom talks about this concept called the pain neuromatrix. What is that?
Well, it's kind of a challenge to the old idea that we have a single pain center in our brains. Instead, the pain neuromatrix, think of it as a network with different brain regions all talking to each other. So you have your sensory cortex, which processes the physical sensations. And then there's the limbic system, adding that emotional layer to the pain. And even areas involved in memory and expectations, they come into play too.
So it's not just one part of my brain yelling, ouch, it's this whole complex system working together.
Exactly. And that complexity helps explain why treating pain can be so challenging. Thernstrom actually shares this anecdote about a pain researcher who's also a vision expert. This guy understands vision down to the cellular level, but he can't figure out where in the brain we perceive something like beauty.
Interesting. So pain and beauty, they both involve more than just a simple physical input.
Precisely. And this leads to a crucial point that Thernstrom emphasizes.
Yeah.
Chronic pain. It's a disease in itself, not just a symptom.
Hold on. You're saying the pain itself changes the brain. Like it's not just that something hurts, but the pain is actually rewiring things.
There's evidence that points in that direction, yeah.
Yeah.
Research suggests chronic pain can lead to a decrease in the brain's gray matter. But the good news is that might be reversible. But it just shows how important it is to treat chronic pain and not just try to manage it.
Okay, so chronic pain is this complex disease that can even affect the brain. That's pretty intense. But one thing that stood out to me was this whole discussion of the mind's power over pain, especially the placebo effect. I gotta be honest, I'm a bit skeptical. Is it really more than just mind games?
It's definitely more than just tricking yourself. We see that placebos trigger real physiological changes, like the release of endorphins. Endorphins are the body's natural painkillers. There was even a study where they showed that a placebo, just a placebo, mind you, activated the brain's pain-reducing system, and it was practically indistinguishable from the effects of real opioids.
Wait, so you're telling me that simply believing that I'm getting treatment can cause my brain to release chemicals that reduce pain?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
But it creates a tricky ethical dilemma for doctors.
Mm.
Imagine the possibilities if they could just harness the power of the placebo effect. But then there's that issue of deception. You know, Honesty is supposed to be the foundation of the doctor-patient relationship. So it's a really tough line to walk.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if I knew it was a placebo, would it still work?
That's the tricky thing about placebos. Being aware of the placebo can actually weaken its power. Thernstrom talks about this experience she had with a fractured toe. She called two different friends for support, right? One was super reassuring, like downplaying the injury, and her pain lessened at first. But then the other friend, she acknowledged the pain, and Thernstrom's pain actually increased.
Interesting. So what are we supposed to make of this placebo effect then? Is it a mind game? Or is it something we can use to our advantage?
That's the big question, isn't it? And Thernstrom actually delves into all these different mind-body techniques, like hypnosis and meditation, even acupuncture. All these techniques that seem to tap into the power of expectation.
I've always been curious about those techniques, but I always assumed they were more for what some people call imagined pain, not actual physical pain, like a back injury or arthritis.
That's a pretty common misconception. While those techniques might seem a little out there, there's actually growing evidence that these approaches can have real benefits for managing real physical pain. You see, they're not just about distracting you from the pain, they're about shifting your focus and expectations, which can actually change how your brain processes those pain signals.
Okay, so maybe there's more to those alternate methods than I initially thought, but I need some convincing here. Does Thernstrom give us any solid proof that this stuff actually works?
Well, she shares this really compelling case study about Holly Wilson. She's a woman who was paralyzed
Hmm.
by a botched surgery. So she suffers from intense chronic pain. And traditional treatments, they haven't really helped. But through hypnosis, she's been able to significantly reduce her pain.
Wow, that's incredible. If hypnosis can help someone dealing with that level of pain, then maybe there's something to it. What about people whose pain stems from emotional issues? Is there anything out there for them?
Thernstrom also talks about the work of Dr. John Sarno. He developed this theory called tension myositis syndrome, or TMS. Basically, it suggests that repressed emotions like anger and anxiety can actually manifest as physical pain in the body.
Whoa, are you saying that bottling up your emotions can lead to back pain?
That's the idea. And it seems to work for some people. Thernstrom tells the story of Susan Cheever. She's a writer who actually used Sarno's methods to alleviate her pain. By recognizing the connection between her emotional state and her pain, she found relief.
It seems like there's a pattern emerging here. Our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, they all play a part in how we experience pain. I have to admit, sometimes I feel like if I just focus on the pain, it gets worse. But if I distract myself, I barely notice it. Is that just me, or is there something to that?
You're definitely not imagining things. Research actually shows that focusing on pain increases the activity in those brain circuits that are responsible for pain perception. Thernstrom describes this study where they just asked people to think about their pain, and it made them experience it more intensely. It's like you're shining a spotlight on the pain, making it feel bigger.
So distraction is the key then. Just keep your mind occupied and the pain goes away.
It's not always that straightforward. Different distractions can have different effects. Fear, for example, can be a double-edged sword. Being afraid of the pain itself can actually make it worse. But then fear of something else entirely, like a sudden threat, that can distract you from the pain, sometimes even making it vanish completely.
That sounds kind of wild. Didn't Thernstrom mention something about a surfer who didn't even feel it when her arm was bitten off by a shark?
Exactly. It's a pretty dramatic example, but it shows how our brains prioritize threats. In a life or death situation, your brain might just shut down pain perception completely so you can focus on survival.
So if a shark attack can make pain disappear, can we kind of, replicate that without the whole shark situation, of course?
Well, Thernstrom talks about how important it is to find those enjoyable experiences that are just as potent as pain, right? We need to, in a way, reclaim the brain from that grip of chronic pain by engaging in activities that bring us joy, activities that actually pull our attention away from the suffering.
That's good advice for life in general, not just pain management. Find something you love, lose yourself in it, and maybe the pain won't feel so all-consuming. But what about the future? Are there any, high-tech solutions on the horizon for dealing with pain?
That's where things get really interesting. Thernstrom explores the potential of something called neuroimaging therapy. Basically, it's where patients learn to control their own pain by observing their brain activity in real time.
Hold on. What? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. How does that even work?
It's pretty amazing. Patients lie in an fMRI scanner, right? And that allows them to see images of their own brain activity. Then they're taught techniques to consciously change their pain response. They're basically learning to control their brain activity just by watching it happen.
So it's like biofeedback, but on a whole other level.
Exactly. And the early results are really promising. Studies show that chronic pain patients using neuroimaging therapy can see their pain significantly reduced. And get this, the benefits seem to stick around even after the treatment ends.
This is incredible. So is this the miracle cure we've all been waiting for?
Well, it's still early days. Neuroimaging therapy is a pretty new field, so there's still a lot more research to do. But it has tremendous potential, not just for treatment, but also for diagnosis and even for providing objective evidence of pain, like in legal cases. It could change everything.
Wow. This is also fascinating. We're talking about a future where we can actually see pain in the brain and learn to control it. It's mind-blowing. But I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
You're absolutely right. We've only just scratched the surface of the complexities of pain and the incredible power of the mind. But let's continue our exploration of these ideas in part 2. While I was reading about this neuroimaging therapy, a question popped into my head. Is this just a really expensive placebo?
That's a good point. If
Yeah.
it all boils down to belief, are we just fooling ourselves with all this fancy technology?
Thernstrom actually brings that up. But she highlights some research suggesting there's more to it than just the placebo effect. They did experiments with different scenarios, like they tried training people in pain reduction techniques, but without the scanner. And then they showed them irrelevant brain images, and even used brain images from other people.
So they were really trying to pinpoint the effect of seeing your own brain activity.
Exactly. And you know what? None of those other approaches were as effective as actually letting people observe their own pain response happening.
So it seems like there's something uniquely powerful about that feedback loop, seeing those specific areas light up and then learning how to calm them down.
Yeah, and it seems like regular biofeedback, where you're monitoring things like your heart rate or muscle tension, it's not as effective for pain management.
So this isn't just about relaxation or distraction, it's about tapping into the brain's plasticity, that ability to change and rewire itself.
That's a key takeaway here. And Dr. DeCharms, the guy who founded the company developing this neuroimaging therapy, he emphasizes that every time we learn something, our brains create new connections and unused connections. They wait away. It's called activity-dependent neuroplasticity.
So by actively engaging those brain regions through neuroimaging, we could actually change their structure and function.
That's the idea. Thernstrom even compares it to mirror therapy, which has been used to treat phantom limb pain.
Mirror therapy, I'm not familiar with that. How does that work?
It's pretty ingenious. A patient with phantom limb pain, they put their intact limb in front of a mirror and move it. And the reflection creates this illusion that their missing limb is moving too.
So you're tricking the brain into thinking the limb is still there. Does that actually work?
It's amazing. But yeah, studies show it can actually reduce phantom limb pain. It might be reversing the maladaptive reorganization. That happened in the brain after the limb was lost.
Our brains are so adaptable, even after such drastic changes.
That's what makes this neuroimaging therapy so exciting. It's harnessing that adaptability to retrain the brain's response to pain.
It all sounds very promising, but let's be realistic for a second. This technology is still pretty cutting edge. What are the limitations here?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that pain. It often presents with very similar symptoms, regardless of the source. It can be tough to differentiate between types of pain based on symptoms alone.
So someone with back pain from a herniated disc might experience similar pain to someone whose pain is mostly from anxiety. Makes diagnosis tricky.
Exactly. And that's where neuroimaging could be a game changer. Thernstrom suggests it could be used as a diagnostic tool, allowing doctors to actually pinpoint the specific areas in the brain that are involved in a patient's pain.
So you could actually see if the pain signals are coming from the sensory cortex, or if there's a strong emotional component involving the limbic system.
Precisely. That kind of detail could lead to much more personalized treatment plans, ones that target the root cause of the pain instead of just masking the symptoms.
It sounds like we're moving towards a future of truly personalized care, which is a far cry from the one-size-fits-all approach we often see today.
It's a really exciting prospect. Thernstrom even mentions Dr. Irene Tracy. She's a leading neuroimaging researcher, and she believes this technology could even be used in legal cases, those involving pain and disability.
Why would that be necessary? Isn't pain already taken into account in those cases?
Well, the thing is, pain is subjective,
Yeah.
and that makes it really hard to prove or disprove. Juries often have a tough time determining if someone's pain is genuine, especially in cases where there's no visible injury.
So brain imaging could offer some objective evidence that someone's pain is real, even if you can't see it from the outside.
Exactly. Dr. Tracy actually envisions a future where you can scan someone's brain and say, look, your pain is 20% from the initial injury, 30% from anxiety, and 50% from dysfunction in these specific brain circuits.
Wow, that level of precision is incredible. But is that really possible? Can we really break down pain into such neat little categories?
That's where things get a little more complicated. Thernstrom mentions that Dr. Tracy has become more cautious in her predictions since they first spoke.
Why is that? Did something happen to change her view?
Well, it seems like the reality of brain imaging is more complex than they initially thought. Dr. Tracy admits that trying to assign percentages to different sources of pain might be oversimplifying things.
That makes sense. All those factors, the physical injury, the emotional response, the brain circuits, they're all interconnected and influencing each other constantly.
Exactly. It's not a simple equation. It's a dynamic system. And unraveling that complexity is a real challenge.
So even though we can see pain in the brain, truly understanding what those images mean is still a work in progress.
Yeah, it's like exploring a vast, uncharted territory. We're still mapping out the landscape of pain in the brain. But Thernstrom seems optimistic that with continued research, we'll see some major breakthroughs in both treatment and our understanding.
That's encouraging. But what about people who don't have access to these cutting-edge therapies? What can they do right now to manage their pain?
Well, Thernstrom is really honest about the limitations of current treatments. She shares her own struggles with finding relief, even after trying countless therapies. both conventional and alternative.
Yeah, it's not like she just tried a couple of things and gave up. She's really done her research.
She's been through it all, trying everything from physical therapy and acupuncture to strong pain meds. And while she's found some relief, the pain is still a constant in her life.
It's a good reminder that chronic pain, it's often a journey, not a destination. There may not be a magic bullet, but there are ways to navigate the ups and downs.
Thernstrom's experience really highlights the importance of finding what works for you, whether it's medication, mind-body techniques, or a combination of approaches.
Finding the right treatment is key. But Thernstrom doesn't just talk about the physical side of pain, does she? She also delves into the psychological impact, the toll it takes on our minds and emotions.
She talks about this concept of learned helplessness, which has been observed in animals that are subjected to inescapable pain.
Like those experiments with the dogs who kept getting shocked and couldn't escape, and eventually they just gave up, even when they had a chance to get away.
Exactly. And Thernstrom wonders if that same sense of helplessness can develop in people dealing with chronic pain. After years of suffering, it's easy to feel like you have no control, like the pain is in charge.
That must be a terrifying feeling trapped by your own body, at the mercy of the pain.
It is. But Thernstrom doesn't leave us in despair. She talks about how important it is to challenge those feelings of helplessness and find ways to regain control.
So even if we can't completely eliminate the pain, we can change how we relate to it, how it affects our lives.
That seems to be a central theme in her book. It's not just about finding the right treatment, but also about finding the right mindset.
So even without a cure, we can still find ways to live well with pain. But how do we even begin to shift our mindset when the pain feels so overwhelming?
That's where the power of the mind comes back into play. Thernstrom actually shares her own experience with a pain toleration study, where she had to endure increasingly painful heat stimuli.
That doesn't sound fun.
Well, it led to a really fascinating discovery. They accidentally burned her during the study.
How did that happen? Weren't they being careful?
They were following all the protocols to avoid injury, but Thernstrom was so convinced that they wouldn't burn her, so trusting of the researchers, that her brain didn't even register the heat as a threat.
So the placebo effect. Her belief that she was safe actually protected her from pain, even when there was real danger.
It's a powerful example of how our beliefs and expectations can literally change our physiological responses.
So if we can convince our brains that the pain is less threatening, maybe we can reduce our suffering.
It's an interesting possibility, and Thernstrom explores this through different cultures and their relationships with pain.
Like how different societies view and cope with pain. That's fascinating.
Exactly. She describes witnessing this religious festival in Kuala Lumpur, where devotees pierce their bodies with hooks and skewers as an act of devotion.
Ouch. That sounds pretty intense.
It does. But these devotees seem to experience very little pain. They enter this trance-like state where they transcend their suffering.
So their belief system, their spiritual practice, allows them to detach from the pain.
It's a powerful illustration of how cultural context and personal beliefs can shape our experience of pain. What might be excruciating for one person could be bearable, even transformative for another.
It seems like there's a lot we can learn from these different cultural perspectives, different ways of understanding and relating to pain.
Thernstrom seems to think so too. She even tries to apply some of those lessons to her own experience, experimenting with meditation and mindfulness techniques.
Did they help her?
She found them helpful, but not a complete solution. It's a good reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to pain management. What works for one person might not work for another.
It sounds like it's all about finding your own path, exploring different options and staying open to new possibilities.
And that's what makes Thernstrom's journey so relatable. It reminds us that even with chronic pain, there's always hope, always room for growth and discovery.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation so far. We've talked about everything from the science of the pain neuromatrix to the power of the placebo effect, from cutting-edge neuroimaging to the wisdom of ancient traditions. It's incredible how much we've covered already.
We're not done yet. In Part 3, we'll dive into Thernstrom's search for meaning in the face of chronic pain and examine the ethics of pain management in a world where these powerful painkillers, they can be both a blessing and a curse.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the Pain Chronicles, one thing that really stuck with me is how Thernstrom's journey isn't just about pain relief, it's about finding meaning. Like, how do we make sense of pain and suffering and find purpose when it feels like it's taking over everything?
Yeah, it's a big part of the chronic pain experience.
Yeah.
And Thernstrom really explores that. She looks at this idea of narrative medicine. It suggests that stories are crucial to the healing process, like how we tell stories about our pain, and how those stories actually shape our experiences, and how changing those narratives can be powerful for coping and even recovery.
So it's not just about treating the physical pain, but the emotional and existential pain that comes with it.
Exactly. She talks about the work of Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen. She's a physician and a pioneer in holistic health. And Dr. Remen really emphasizes that illness, even chronic pain, can be a catalyst for growth, for transformation.
I've heard that before, the whole pain can be a gift thing, but honestly, when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see it that way.
Thernstrom admits she felt the same way at first. She even found Dr. Remen's book irritating, like it was minimizing the suffering people go through. But as she explored the nature of pain, she started to see the potential for growth, for finding meaning even in those dark times.
So it's not about denying the pain, it's more about integrating it into your life, learning from it, maybe even growing from it.
Yeah, that seems to be a major theme in her journey. She shares a story from Dr. Remen's book about a young baseball player who lost his leg to cancer. And he was just filled with anger and bitterness, refused to go back to school, pushed away his friends and family.
That's heartbreaking, but I can see why he'd react that way. Losing a leg like that, how do you even cope?
Well, Dr. Remen worked with him, encouraging him to face those emotions, to find a new sense of purpose. And eventually he found some solace in helping other young people facing similar challenges. He turned his pain into a source of strength and compassion.
Wow, what a powerful story. But it must take so much courage and resilience to reach that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it's important to acknowledge that not everyone finds that kind of redemption. For some, chronic pain is this relentless tormentor, a source of constant anguish.
That brings up a really important question then. What about the ethics of pain management? How do we balance the need to alleviate suffering with the risks of these strong painkillers?
Yeah, that's a really complex issue.
Mm.
And Thernstrom addresses it head on. She digs into the opioid crisis, the overprescribing of painkillers, and the devastating consequences of addiction. And she doesn't shy away from the fact that these drugs, while they offer relief for some, have also caused so much harm.
It's such a tough balance. On the one hand, you have people in excruciating pain who need help. But then there's the risk of addiction and overdose and all the societal costs. How do we even approach that?
Thernstrom explores this dilemma through the stories of patients she's met, some whose lives were saved by opioids and others whose lives were ruined by them. She emphasizes the need for a more individualized approach to pain management, one that takes into account the person's specific circumstances, the risks and benefits of different treatments, and the importance of treating the root causes of pain, not just masking the symptoms.
It's a call for more compassionate and informed care. But what does that actually look like in practice? How do we move past this current system that often fails both the people who need pain relief and those who get addicted?
Well, Thernstrom doesn't give us easy answers, but she suggests a more holistic approach, one that combines conventional medicine with mind-body techniques, alternative therapies, and a deeper understanding of the psychological and social factors that contribute to pain.
So it's about seeing the whole person, not just the pain.
Exactly. Recognizing that pain is this complex experience shaped by our biology, our psychology, and our social environment.
It's a powerful message, and it's something that resonates deeply with me. This whole deep dive has been incredible, taking us from the workings of the brain to the power of the mind, from cutting-edge technology to ancient wisdom. But most importantly, it's a reminder of the human stories behind pain, the resilience, the suffering, and the search for meaning and relief.
And while there may not be one solution to pain, the Pain Chronicles gives us hope by understanding pain, by harnessing our minds, by advocating for better care, and by finding meaning even in suffering. We can face the challenges of chronic pain and create a better future for ourselves and others.
What a great way to wrap up this deep dive. And it leaves us with so much to think about. If you're out there dealing with chronic pain, remember, you're not alone. There are resources available, treatments to explore, and communities to support you. And as we've learned, the mind plays a huge role in how we experience pain. So be kind to yourself, explore those mind-body techniques, and never underestimate your own resilience. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of pain. We hope it sparked your curiosity and empowered you to take control of your pain and live a more fulfilling life. Share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.